You are not a bad man. You have told yourself that 1,000 times, in cheap hotel rooms, on cold mountain passes, staring at the fire while the rest of the camp sleeps. You repeat it like a prayer you stopped believing in years ago. You are not a bad man. But then the morning comes, and the gang needs something. And Dutch has a plan. And you pick up your gun, because that is what you do, that is what you have always done, and you walk back out into a world that is changing around you faster than you can process. In a body that is quietly beginning to betray you for people who will not be there when it matters most. This is not a story about an outlaw. This is a story about a man who figured out the truth too late, and the truth is this: Arthur Morgan was never free. Not for a single day of his life. Let's start at the very beginning. Not the beginning of the game, the beginning of him. Arthur Morgan grew up with nothing. His father was a criminal, a drifter. A man who was eventually hanged for larceny, taken from Arthur when Arthur was still a child. His mother was already dead. So there he was, a boy, alone, no family, no direction, no one coming to save him. And then Dutch Vanderlinde found him. Understand what that means to a child who has nothing. Dutch did not just offer food and shelter. He offered an identity, a philosophy, a reason to exist. He told Arthur that society was corrupt, that the law was a lie, that the gang, the family were the only honest thing left in a dishonest world. When you are a starving orphan and someone tells you that you are special, that you belong, that the world outside is the broken thing and not you, you believe them. You believe them completely. Arthur believed Dutch completely. And that belief, that desperate, absolute, total belief in one man's vision, is what made everything that followed not just painful, but inevitable. Here is what the game never says out loud, but shows you in every cutscene, every camped conversation, every quiet moment Arthur writes in his journal. He knew. Long before the ending. Long before the tuberculosis. Long before the betrayal. Arthur Morgan knew that something was wrong. He had been watching Dutch for years, watching the plans get bigger and the excuses get louder. Watching Dutch's ideology shift from genuine belief in freedom to something that looked more and more like ego wearing the costume of philosophy. Watching the gang make promises it could never keep while the world around them closed in like a fist. He saw it, he wrote about it, and he stayed anyway. Because what do you do when the only family you have ever known is walking toward a cliff? Do you leave them? Do you grab them? Do you walk with them to the edge and hope that somehow, impossibly, this time it is different? Arthur Morgan chose to stay. Every single time, he chose to stay. And that choice, that loyal, tragic, exhausted choice, is the engine of everything that destroys him. Let's talk about what Arthur's daily life actually costs him. You ride for Dutch. You rob for Dutch. You rob for Dutch. You threaten, intimidate, collect debts, rough up strangers, burn things, kill people who are probably just trying to live their lives, all because the gang needs money. All because Dutch has a plan. There is always a plan. The plan is always almost working, and when it fails, because it always fails, Dutch finds someone to blame. The circumstances, the Pinkertons, Micah, anyone but himself. Arthur absorbs this. He absorbs every failed plan like it is his personal moral debt. He carries the weight of every terrible thing the gang does because he has nothing else to carry. The gang is his whole world. His guilt and his loyalty live in the same body and they fight each other every waking hour. Meanwhile, he is writing in that journal, drawing, observing, recording, the animals he sees, the landscapes, the people he meets, the moments of strange, accidental beauty in a life that should have no room for beauty. That journal is the most painful thing in the entire game when you understand what it means. Arthur Morgan, this enormous, violent, terrifying man, was an artist trapped inside an outlaw's life. He had a sensitivity to the world that the world never allowed him to express. So he expressed it in a notebook that nobody was ever supposed to read. He did not become violent because he was empty. He became violent because he was full. Full of feeling, full of conscience, full of longing for something he could not name, and the only context he was ever given for those feelings was the barrel of a gun. Then comes the tuberculosis, and here is where the cruelty of Arthur Morgan's life reaches something almost architectural in its precision. Because the tuberculosis does not just kill him, It does something far more interesting and far more devastating. It clarifies him. Before the diagnosis, Arthur was drifting, loyal but uncertain, violent but guilty, following Dutch, but quietly losing faith. He was a man in the middle of his life who had not yet decided what he believed. The tuberculosis forces the decision. When you know you are dying, every compromise becomes unbearable. Every justification collapses. Every mission Dutch sends you on now costs something that cannot be replaced. Time. Actual, finite, running out time. And Arthur starts to see, with an almost brutal clarity, what he has been spending his life on. He has been spending it on a dream that was never real, on a man who never deserved the loyalty he was given, on a version of family that was always more transaction than love, and now he is running out of time to find anything else. Let's talk about Dutch van der Linde, because you cannot talk about Arthur Morgan without talking about the man who built him. Dutch was a genius at one specific thing, making people feel chosen. Making people feel that their suffering had meaning, that the violence was justified, that the dream was worth any price. He did this to Arthur for 20 years. 20 years of trust me. 20 years of we just need one more big score. 20 years of philosophy and passion and a voice that could convince you that the sunrise was a lie if it did not fit the plan. And Arthur trusted him, completely, stupidly, heartbreakingly. Because Arthur was not stupid. He was not naive in the ordinary sense. He was just loyal in a way that the world punishes. He was a man who once he decided someone was worth dying for never really undecided it, even when the evidence told him to. Even when every rational part of him could see what Dutch was becoming. The betrayal at the end is not a surprise. You can feel it building from the first chapter. What is devastating is not that Dutch betrays Arthur. It is that Arthur always knew it was possible and loved him anyway. That is not stupidity. That is the specific tragedy of a person who was taught that loyalty is the only form of love available to someone like him. And then there is John Marston. Arthur spends the final act of his life saving John. Getting him out, making sure John's family survives, running interference, buying time, bleeding himself dry for a man who will get to live the life Arthur never had. Think about what that takes. Arthur is dying. He is coughing up blood. He is weaker every day. And he uses what is left, every remaining ounce of energy, every last dollar of borrowed time, to make sure someone else gets the ending he was never going to receive. He does not do it for gratitude. He does not do it for recognition. He does it because somewhere inside the guilt and the violence and the 20 years of compromise, there was still a man who believed that some things were worth doing even if you were not going to be there to see them matter. That is the Arthur Morgan the game never fully explains. Not the outlaw, not the enforcer, the man underneath all of it who kept doing good things in a life that kept punishing him for them. He dies on a hillside. If you play with high honor, he drags himself to the top of a hill to watch the sunrise one last time. His body gives out and he rests his head on the rock and he goes. And here's what that moment actually contains if you let yourself sit inside it. He died having given everything. He died having saved people who could not save him back. He died having never owned land, never built a home, never had a family, never had a morning that belonged only to him. He died without the dream Dutch promised, without the freedom Dutch described, without any of the things he was told his suffering was building toward. He just died, on a hill, alone, with the sunrise, and somehow that is enough for him. That is the most heartbreaking part of all, that Arthur Morgan, after everything, found a way to make peace with a life that gave him almost nothing worth keeping. He was not redeemed by the world. The world did not change for him. The system did not break open. Dutch did not come back and apologize. Nothing was fixed. Arthur just stopped fighting long enough to watch the light come up over the mountains and decided that this one quiet moment that cost him everything to reach was enough. It should not be enough. It is enough for him. And that is why Arthur Morgan's story does not feel like a game. It feels like a eulogy for every person who ever spent their whole life being loyal to something that was never going to save them back. And somehow, impossibly, went out still believing that the loyalty was worth it. He didn't lose because he was weak. He lost because he was the only honest person in a world full of men who used honesty as a weapon.